Welcome, everybody. Here we are for yet another episode of the Corner Blue. I'm Andres Rico. I'm here with Award Varado. And the Battle Royale, the Caribbean Battle Royale, is finally over. Despite getting Concacaf at the last minute with the whole ranking system, the reformatting, the reboot of this Caribbean Battle Royale, El Salvador landed where it was the whole time, in the 6th spot. So we made it, ladies and gentlemen. We made it through a great series against St. Kitts, but on the back end, a little bit of doubt because of some of the issues that went on at Cusca in the second game at home. But despite all the problems or the weird sensation or taste in the mouth, we're in the octagonal. It didn't matter that Montagliani, the Concacaf, had plans for Canada. We're in it to win it, maybe. But it's something to be excited about. We haven't been in the last phase of qualifying for the Concacaf since back in 2010, right? I remember that match against Panama when that El Lomazo off of Chepe Martinez went into the goal. What an amazing feeling. Definitely different than this time around, but we're going to break it down. Well, what are your sensations now that our spot's guaranteed in the final round of qualifying?
I'm excited. I mean, I think that every Salvadorian fan has the right to be excited. I understand there's a sector who feels very negative about the national team, but it seems like that's the case no matter what. I think that given that we haven't been at this stage for 11, almost 12 years, I mean, the last qualifiers, I think we have a reason to be excited. We're going to be competing against the best in the area, and we're going to be competing for a spot in the World Cup. And everybody knows that I'm a positive person. I feel that we have a chance. I'm not saying we're going to make it. It's going to be easy, but I mean, anything can happen in soccer. I think we're going to build momentum. I've said it time and again. There was a before and after back in 2008 when we beat Panama. Nobody gave anything for El Salvador before that Panama game. Panama was an up-and-coming team. They had been working very hard. They had a lot of players playing in Colombia, some players in some minor leagues in Europe, some players in the U.S., even in USL. And Panama was a team that everyone was talking about. You know, they're going to beat El Salvador, and we ended up beating them. And then, as we know, we put up a battle to make it to the World Cup. Unfortunately, we didn't. But I think that we can do it. You know, we are getting some very nice players, new faces. I like the way the team is going. I'm excited. That was the goal. The goal was to qualify to the octagonal. We're there. People may say, well, the goal should be the World Cup. Yes, that is the ultimate goal. But you cannot make it to the World Cup unless you make it to the octagonal. So we are moving in the right direction. We have even more to look forward to in this Gold Cup because we're not only playing for the Gold Cup, but this is the only opportunity we have to prepare for the octagonal. There's not going to be any window for friendly games. If we look at the schedule, it's going to be a packed schedule for the next 7 months until the next World Cup in Qatar. So I'm excited. I'm excited about the Gold Cup. I'm excited about the qualifiers coming up right after the Gold Cup. So we were unbeaten. I understand the teams were not the strongest teams in the world, but isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we were asking for whenever we would barely beat the Caribbean islands under DLC 1-0, 2-0, even tie sometimes? And we were like, oh, no, we should be like killing these teams. What we did this time around, 4 games, we won by a good margin. So we did what we had to do. So I think there are many reasons to be happy about this.
Of course, you want to see the national team close out against St. Kitts and Nevis. the best way possible with the blowout. That's the expectation I feel like your average fan is going to have, even, from casual to average fan. I think the main thing to walk away from the home match, the match at home against the Cusco, was, yes, there were many opportunities missed, but I think instead of focusing and throwing shade at Bonilla or at Mayen, you look at the plays, you see what the approach was. Yes, you want them to finish some of those. I feel like Mayen can get a little more slack cut, because the saves that were made on some of his shots on goal were pretty spectacular. I know there was one where he just had bad luck with his placement and just got a little under it and shanked it. But there were plenty of good approaches to goal. I think in terms of Bonilla, he's just in a dry spell right now. He's just in a bad streak. And I mean, if you watch other sports, if you know that in certain sports, players have these dry spells, and it isn't necessarily an indicator of their talent. I'm not apologizing for Bonilla. I have nothing against him. It would have been great to see him get out of that rut, especially with all the opportunities that he had against St. Kitts at home. But considering that we have a lack of options up on top, a player like Bonilla, what he's done in the past in terms of the goals that he scored, you have to find a way of keep giving him those opportunities to get back in shape, get his mind into the game and not overthink things, and just get back into a rhythm, because I think that'll pay off. Obviously, at the same time, you got to start looking at different options. If, the more we get closer to the octagonal, the bigger the question gets on who's our striker, who's our reference in the box. Yeah, of course they're going to be looking for options. That's in the back of their mind. They have to be active on that. But I don't know. I just didn't agree with the videos of fans, lined up at Cusca waiting for the players to go onto the team bus. Like, they just qualified for the octagonal, and they're just talking hella shit the whole time. Like, dude, I bet none of those motherfuckers, sorry, because that's what they are, none of those motherfuckers would appreciate anyone showing up to their work and talking the same amount of shit or putting up with that type of stuff. That's what I don't get, man. But, there's that passion, or so-called passion, that fans have, a so-called way of seeing the game. I don't necessarily agree with it. Yeah, sometimes you do want to diss people or just call them out for messing up, but I just don't agree with that, man. Yeah, it's not my style. But in any case, I think it sort of dampened the mood, right? When Bonilla missed that PK, there was a before and after in that match where it seemed like the crowd started to get a little more angsty and stressed out and less patient with how the team was performing. But at the end of the day, there were good spells throughout. There's things that you can watch this game and analyze, and you realize there's positive things despite, a short-sighted result as the 2-0 was.
Yeah. I'll tell you about those fans that were waiting for the players to come out of the locker room to their bus. I think that's what happens when you mix alcohol with passion, right?
Or the wrong people. People know how to drink, man. Because I'm sorry, you can get faded and have fun, but I just don't get that shit.
There's a certain sector of fans that I see it all the time. I mean, I see it on my social media, that it almost seems like they're hoping for a national team to fail so they can have an opportunity to throw more shit at the national team. I see it a lot. So, but there are more good fans out there. I know it, fans that support the national team, and it's not about vender humo or lying to. I think
we're having an agenda,
Yeah, we know where we stand. Obviously, we didn't beat the best teams in the area, but that's who we had to beat this time. That's who we had to play. We can't think about the big guns until we are with the big guns, and now we are up there with them, and now it's our opportunity to prepare, to get as much work as possible in, take advantage of the upcoming friendly matches, take advantage of the Gold Cup, and compete and see what we can do. There's nothing written in this sport, and anything can happen. It's not going to be easy. We know it, but we've seen El Salvador play really, really good games against the big teams. We've seen it. We know that what happened last December against the US is not what we have, it's not who we are. So to me, it's like, let's look at it as a whole. As a whole, we had to win the first two matches against Antigua Barbuda. We did by a huge margin. And then we had to beat St. Kitts and Nevis to qualify to the octagonal. And we won the series 6-0. Come on, I mean, 6-0. I understand it's not the greatest team in the world. I'm not even saying that, but we won 6-0. And we qualified to a stage where we haven't been in 12 years. And you still have fans screaming negative stuff at the players. Come on. I mean, to me, that's like, those are some of the things that I don't understand. I mean, fans have the right, you know, they feel that they pay $20 for the ticket and they have the right to scream whatever they want. It's okay. But to me, I think the players, the coaching staff, they know where they stand. They know what they've done. Obviously, we haven't accomplished anything yet, but we have taken a huge step towards a big goal, which is qualifying to the World Cup. And let's keep in mind that the ultimate goal has been 2026. So this is a huge bonus. This is a huge opportunity. And I'm sure we have the same chances that all of the other 7 teams in the octagonal have. We all have opportunities. We're all fighting for the same goal. So, but going back to the final game, we can't just focus on that game, but let's speak the truth. Yes, it wasn't the prettiest game. It was probably the
It felt like the De Los Goals era for like periods of the game.
Yeah, I mean, probably in terms of the tempo and the speed at which the ball was moving. But even, you know, with that being said, the ball was moved around with trying to create spaces and trying to attack, and we created a lot of opportunities. The fact that we're talking about all the opportunities that Bonilla missed and that Gerson missed, that means that we created opportunities. And as long as we keep creating opportunities, the goals are going to come. Whether that's going to be Bonilla or if that's going to be Rugamas or Eric Rivera or some other name out there, I don't know. But you create opportunities and the goals are going to come. And I trust that that's going to happen. But yes, I mean, the last game was not the prettiest game we've had. But also let's keep in mind, 4 games in 2 weeks with lots of traveling to very remote places. Could be that the team was tired. It could be that, you know, they were just, I understand the coaching staff is trying to have the players take every game serious, not to, you know, think that because we had beaten them 4-0, we were already in. I think the players tried. Again, we created a lot of opportunities. So it was not the best way to end it, but it was not about that game. It was about the whole series. We won it, huge margin. We're in. I'm happy with the result because, like I said earlier, now that we're in the octagonal, now we have more time. Keep in mind, this coach has only worked with the team 2 months. Less than 2 months.
Less than 2 months, yeah.
So now we just, you know, we bought more time to prepare for the octagonal, and things can only improve from here. So to me, it's positive. speaking, specifically about certain players, the Bonilla factor. I have said it, and I'm going to say it again, and I might get criticized for it. To me, he's having a bad moment. La pólvora mojada, obviously, it's clear. But to say that he's like a terrible forward and he should never be called to the national team again, people forget that he has scored some of the most important goals for us in the last 3-4 years. He has scored big goals against big teams. Mexico, Jamaica, are a few that I can think of. He's a player that creates spaces in the front. He has good movement in the front. And unfortunately, he hasn't scored, and that's his job. I understand that's his job. So I really hope that he gains confidence again. So that's the Bonilla factor. But then Mayen, when I see criticism towards Mayen, when I see things like Bonilla and Mayen are done with the national team, they should never be called again. I'm like, are you serious?
Yes.
Mayen was probably our best player prior to Hugo Perez coming into the national team. He's been a consistent player.
Once the Los Cobos opened the gate for him, because he's made it. He's made his improvements. He made, like we've talked here with him, he made that transition back to El Salvador so he could be seen. He got his minutes. Aguila also improved with him being there, getting to the final against Alianza. Then things seemed to kind of taper off a little bit this last tournament. But like you said, here you have the brains, the person that controls the tempo. We see the difference when he's off and on the pitch and he's getting all this shade. I don't get it.
That to me is like even makes less sense. I understand Bonilla, it's been 3 games, no goals, but Mayen comes in as a sub.
Target. He's an easy target, and then on top of that, just his relationship with the fans hasn't necessarily been the best one. He tends to be pretty vocal about stuff and hasn't necessarily played to his favor. Mayen, on the other hand, is pretty low key when it comes to the fans. He just does his job, man. And, you can shank a couple, it happens. But yeah, I just don't get the shade. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either, but I think it's time to move on. The first goal has been achieved, make it to the octagonal, and we saw new faces. I mean, that's again that I don't know if I'm being repetitive. I don't know if I said this in the last episode, but one of the things that I'm really enjoying with Hugo Perez is the fact that he's not afraid to make subs. He has used all 5 subs, I think, in the last 4 games. And yes, he in a way he had to do that to rotate players given how tight the schedule is and the amount of games and the traveling and everything. That's great. But at the same time, when the players have come in, we have seen a shift, a positive shift in the team. So I like the fact that we have a good bench. I almost feel like almost all of our players in our bench could easily start.
Yeah, you mentioned that previously. And I just want to piggyback really quick on some of the stuff that I saw against St. Kitts. Jairo was on a roll that match. I mean, he got the assist with Josh. He was involved in the second goal that ended up in Mayen's goal. You saw Chalatillo go in and how he almost had that assist off of, I think it was Bonilla, right? Where he chested it down and then just Bonilla wasn't able to resolve it in the box. Yeah. And we saw Clavito Portillo hold things down and as a defensive mid. Larin, he's showing he's a veteran that can hold his own at this point. Like few players from the U23s that competed for the spot and for London have continued on with this process. Their generation's starting to age out, but Larin looks like he's a young kid, young stud, the way that he's playing right now. that one play where he didn't give up on the ball and slid and did a taquito to keep it in. That was impressive. You see him down the line. You see him, you know, making the right decisions and helping that system of playing out of the back a lot. And that's something positive because we mentioned it before. Hugo Perez is going to need those leaders, those veterans with experience, pardon the redundancy, that will be able to kind of give perspective to the newer players, to be the anchor as they go into these uncharted waters. Granted, none of these players have played this instance of the qualifiers. This is uncharted waters for them, but they do know what the pressure is of playing Mexico at home. They do know what it's like going to El Azteca, whether it's with the national team or with their clubs in the Concacaf Champions. And I think those are the pieces that Hugo needs to find that balance with those veterans and then bringing in the new blood. And these subs show that he's willing to give those kids minutes to help themselves reestablish themselves, to feel comfortable. And like we mentioned, these were glorified friendly matches. And fortunately, all the pawns fell in our favor. And now we get to enjoy something that has been negated to us over a decade, in the sense that our football has been broken. The last time that we made it to Hexagonal, look what happened with Maños. That whole generation burnt out. All the progress that was made during the first Little Scobos stint was basically, it basically imploded. And then you had these false starts where there was some, great expectations, and because of how broken our system is in El Salvador, it self imploded yet again. It's like our football has always found a way of self sabotaging, and it's because of the way that it's run. It's because of interest involved. But I think what we're seeing is, little by little, I'm starting to think, oh wait, did Hugo Carrillo learn something? With all the scrutiny that his administration's been through, the previous one, it seems like, okay, they're finally getting the hint. You got to step back a little bit, hire people to do some of the logistical and sporting decisions. You handle the administrative business side. Let the sports people do the sports stuff. And I think, and he even said it in an interview recently, that they've delegated certain duties to people that they didn't used to, that they've let go of the reins a little bit, and we're starting to see the fruits of that. And I think that's the main thing that people need to focus on and remember. This octagonal wasn't going to happen. I mean, it seemed like it was all handed to us in the easiest of ways with the ranking system, but we would have gotten destroyed, I think, if it would have just been, without COVID or any of the delay. If it would have just jumped into the hexagonal, we would have had more of the December results because of the disarray that the situation was in, the team was in, the administration. It would have been same old results. But I think right now there's just been a slight stimmy shot in terms of the reorganization of how La FESFUT is handling things. There's been this whole eye-opening, as we've talked about plenty of times with Hugo, on, okay, immediate results. We kind of have to look to the U.S. rather than hold these players in scrutiny and kind of underestimate their abilities if they're not starting, if they're not playing MLS. Let's take a chance with some of these players. And you're starting to see that. And you're starting to see players come in and make that transition a little smoother than it has in the past. So I think we have to enjoy this octagonal for what it is. It's time to play with those pawns, but we can't forget that the main objective is 2026, man. Like, all this is nice and all this is exciting, but right now is when they're starting to lay that foundation to what 2026 can be.
I agree with everything you said, Andres, and yes, a great point was kind of reviving Jairo Enriquez, because he was the top star in that U20 team. I mean, you and I were there in Turkey, and Jairo was the guy who, from the first match, there were talks about Galatasaray following him, and other big clubs following him.
You couldn't get an interview with them.
Yeah. I remember. I remember walking in the streets of Turkey, and I think I came across his agent. Because at that time I knew Oscar Umansor was the acting agent for FESA over there, and part of the reason he was there is because FESA had a good amount of players in that team. But I remember we run across each other coming out of the stadium, and he said, "Yeah, there's teams, like Galatasaray following him," and there were talks, among the players too, that Granito, was another one who had teams following him closely.
Well. There was a rumor so Corinthians was behind him.
Yeah, so it's nice to see, because I was surprised when he was used as a right back. Knowing that Jairo's strength has always been his speed, taking on players one-on-one. Obviously, he doesn't have a big frame, and it was nice to kind of see old Jairo again. In the last game, so I hope he can continue being called up and improving and kind of going back to doing what he does. Because sometimes when players go pro, they go from a U20 to pro. Sometimes coaches have the players put the parking brake on, and they want him to play differently and play more simple style, which is great. I mean, there's also a lot of benefits towards doing that, but sometimes you have players that are different. We're talking the Enrique Hernandez, the Jairo Enriquez, players who, they are talented, so you give them more space to use their creativity on the field, because they can make a big difference alone by just doing what they do. So I was very happy to see that. And also, let's not forget, Eric Zabaleta got 4 games in. He got a goal. He was a sub-captain. He ended up being the captain in the last game. So that's another player that we've gained. So, I think this whole round has left so many positive things that, when we focus on just what happened in the last game, we forget about all the positive things: rescuing Jairo Enriquez, having Eric Zabaleta get minutes in with the national team, Larin, like you said, doing better and better each day. Cabrita Portillo. I've been surprised.
You mean Clavito or Cabrita?
Clavito. Sorry, Clavito. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily surprised. I actually hadn't seen much of him, but to see him, go out there with the personality that he has shown for that position, it's very positive. And Cartagena, Cartagena played a game and he did really well. His first game, U20 player, and it seems like U23. Mm-hmm. It seems like Hugo is really working on that psychological aspect that he has talked about so much.
There's that confidence.
Confidence, yes. The players go in there and they don't seem like, we've seen, I've seen many times. I'm not going to say names because I don't want to burn any players, but I've seen those players who are top stars in the local league in El Salvador, and they play really well, and people are like, we should call them to the national team. They play for the national team, and then they seem shaky. They seem very nervous. They don't know what to do, and they don't shine, not even close to what they do at the local league. Obviously, there's a big gap. But where I'm trying to go with all of this is that you also have to work that psychological aspect with the players. So when they jump in, they make their debut with the senior team, they have more confidence and they know what they're doing and they don't feel nervous. And those are some of the things I've seen. All the players who play games for the first time, I was very pleased with what I saw. So many positive things out of this round, in my opinion.
Yeah, the U23s, you saw Renderos, you saw Cartagena. We got to see Villalobos team up with Eric Zabaleta. We also got to see Ronan Rodriguez. And I think obviously Josh Perez as well. But I think of the center backs, the one that looked the most comfortable was Ronan Rodriguez. Villalobos seemed a little bit shaky in the first series. Granted, St. Kitts and Nevis didn't really, attack too much, though there were a couple scares in that second match versus St. Kitts with the Zabaleta error in the back or the early shot on goal within like the first 3 minutes of the match in either half. So they weren't challenged that much, but it did appear that Ronald Rodriguez and Zabaleta did well working off of each other as the two center backs. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Roberto Dominguez. I think he can be rehabbed back into the level that we've grown accustomed to seeing him with the national team. Now that he is back playing domestically, things didn't work out in Albania and prior to that in Bolivia, but he's gained that experience of playing abroad. And one interesting point that we haven't talked about recently, but we've mentioned it before, is I think the main thing to focus on in the development of this team heading to 2026 is now that this team is in the octagonal, there's going to be more eyes on them. And Larin mentioned it in an interview recently where, your value increases once the team starts doing well. Once you're in the octagonal, that's a certain pedigree. Granted, it is a Concacaf. You can still minimize it if you want, but these are going to be some pretty marquee matches when it comes to the area. And if, just like we saw with the first De Los Cobos era, several players were able to migrate and sign abroad as soon as that, and even before the hexagonal was over, because we had Cheo make that move to Alajuela, and we saw him elevate his level once he left, and it coincided perfectly with the hexagonal. Like, he did amazing. Then towards the end, we had the three players, Cristian Castillo, Julio Martinez, and Fito, go to Leon. Unfortunately, things didn't work out for them there. We had Pacheco go to New York Red Bulls. We had Cristian Castillo, after the Leon episode, move on to DC United. We had Derisu Mansour, who got to play under De Los Cobos with Chicago Fire. We had Ramon Sanchez play for the Quakes. So the doors will be opening. I think that's the main thing that I'm excited about. Granted, I'm going to try and book a flight or two to El Salvador for the octagonal. Like, those are amazing experiences. There's nothing like it. It's, when it comes to the national team, it's the closest that we get to the World Cup, especially when it's at home. When you're a masochist and you love the blue and white, these are the moments that we wait for. And as you can tell, all right, we're getting to octagonal this year, around 08, 09, right? For the 2010 World Cup. That was the previous one. Previous to that, it was 98. Previous to that, wasn't it 82? Like, there was this huge drought where we didn't even make it to that point. Granted, the hexagonal didn't start until, the 94 World Cup, if I'm not mistaken. But we haven't had successful qualifying runs in a short span of time. There's usually a decade in between. And I think that's what fans also forget. And I don't know if it's like the younger guys that like watching European soccer and identify with that they want these instant results. I don't know if those are the guys that are on, or people on their phone, that Florentino is saying, we need to shorten soccer games because we can't compete with the attention spans of these guys. I don't know. But
yeah, the guy's crying right now because Sergio Ramos is leaving Real Madrid.
That guy. Those types of guys. In any case, I think the main thing is you put your feet on the ground. You get to enjoy the moment as a fan. But the bottom line is being in this octagonal elevates the marquee of the Salvadoran player, especially if we start getting good results. And we're going to have plenty of stuff to talk about once we start seeing players exit the country, or the players that are in the US possibly moving on to different horizons, or jumping from the USL to the to MLS. Just like Richard Menjivar mentioned here, once you start cracking the national team, once you start doing well with the national team, doors open. And I think that needs to be that's what we're going to see in those immediate results of the marquee of the Salvadoran player elevate. And I think that's what's going to help us get even further than we will this time around in 2026.
A huevo. No, definitely. It's a great opportunity for our players, and that's obviously the fans don't see it that way. They don't always see that part, but it's very different to be playing the preliminary rounds where you're playing against the islands to playing the octagonal, and basically at that point, that's where clubs are looking at you. If your team does well, you're going to have opportunities to play abroad, or in this case, since we do have a good amount of players from the States, perhaps it opens their opportunities to play in Europe, or like you said, players from the USL finally make that jump to the MLS. It's just it just opens so many doors, because when an agent, for example, if you're an agent, I worked as an agent, those are some of the things clubs want to know. So is the team playing the hexagonal? No, we didn't. We were out in the first round, and then they're like, oh, okay, so these players are not competing against the best in the area, right? So there are many things that happens here. Psychologically, the players know that. The players know that if they play a really good match against Mexico, chances are that phone is going to ring from clubs abroad. Even if those clubs are from MLS, that phone is going to ring. So for the players, it's just a huge boost of confidence playing those games against the US, Mexico, Costa Rica, Canada. I mean, this is it, so it's like, it's good for us, even if the focus is 2026. Wouldn't it be great to approach the 2026 qualifiers with a whole bunch of players playing abroad and doing well, with a lot of miles under their belt in high competitive matches? So
throughout the
year. So that's what we should be focusing on, or at least taking all of those points into account before we say, solo a perder van a ir a la octagonal. There's a lot more than that the octagonal offers. And I think we're going to put up a fight.
Yeah, I think the level of preparation, considering that it's been condensed into 5 weeks so far, it does give you hope that they're going to take on these challenges in the best of ways. There seems to be some harmony between the administrative people and then the sporting people, the people that run the team, the management of the team. And that's definitely important. And hopefully it's something that is sustainable. And I think one thing that's going to help that sustainability are the results. Just think about if somehow we wouldn't have made it. It would have been that debacle, right? The Los Cobos had us there. They take a risk with Hugo Perez, and the whole thing just implodes. Where do you go from there? Where would you be able to recreate this type of exigencia? Sorry, the word's skipping my mind. That this series of matches is going to do. We're going to have a series of 14 matches here. That's crazy. That's crazy. Just think about that. Like, even with the Hexagonal, it was 10. Now it's 14, and it's condensed to an even shorter period of time where they're going to be playing 3 matches in 1 week. That's insane. But we're starting with that, or you see Hugo Perez starting with that concept of rotation, subs, knowing when to bring them on, and keep adding to the mix. He said he has a pool of 56 players. I don't know if the level of everyone is at, is equal or equitable, but the more that he brings people in, he's going to be able to see who is at that level. So when you got to cut it to a list of 20 or 23, you have a bench that'll be able to fit in these spots seamlessly. Hopefully, that's the goal. And that's what the friendly match and what the Guatemala is going to help with. That's what the friendly match in Croatia is going to help with. And then obviously the Gold Cup kind of replicates that intensity of the qualifiers. But we still need to remember that the main purpose of these matches is to still fine tune everything. I think we should just, or at least as a fan, I think we should just forget trying to go far or prove ourselves in the Gold Cup, but just take it game by game and fine tune and get these players that get that taste of that high level of competition without burning them out. Because within 2 months of that, the octagonal starts. And speaking of that, the last group stage match for El Salvador will be against Mexico. And by September 2nd, El Salvador will be debuting in the octagonal versus the Stars and Stripes in El Cusca. So that's a turnaround of a month and a half. And if they make it to the next round of the Gold Cup, that's even less time. So hold on to your horses, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be an exciting ride.
And speaking of good news, we heard last night from Hugo Perez himself that Alex Roldan, who has been in the radar of many of us for the last 2+ years, has committed to playing for La Selecta. That's huge news. That is, that is one of the biggest news we've heard. 26-year-old, I believe, doing really well for Seattle Sounders. Guatemala was after him. I mean, Guatemala was swearing that he was going to play for Guatemala. And now we hear the great news speaks, really, really great about the plan and the organization of the coaching staff or the administrative staff with Diego Enriquez, doing their job. I mean, I myself have been putting these players out there for a long time. Alex, I think I mentioned him like 2.5 years ago when he was in the draft for the MLS. And that's just huge. I mean, it's great. He plays as a right back, and he's going to bring in some pretty good, healthy competition to that right back position with Brian Tamacas, who's been doing really well. So every time, I mean, that's a good problem for Hugo Perez to have, to have more healthy competition. It just makes the local player push even harder, and also the player coming from the U.S. To also prove to everyone that he deserves to be called up and play. So I don't know what you think about that. To me, it's great news. The more players are following the steps of Eric Zabaleta, perhaps that helped as well. The fact that Eric is playing there, a veteran in the MLS. But yeah, I mean, it's a great news overall.
I think it's exciting, and it kind of shows that you're going to have players that'll sign up, and then you'll have, your Tomas Romeros, in the same type of situation that kind of go another direction. But the key is to have a stable project, to be able to present players that are on the fence in terms of what national team they're deciding to represent, because you can only have one. And I think it is exciting, like you mentioned, that competition with the Macas will be very vital, because as Larin has mentioned in interviews, if each player isn't comfortable with their spot, that's going to push them even more. And that's something that has been mentioned previously about the second De Los Cobos stint, that it seemed that some players felt that they were the owners of their spot. That is not confirmed. I have not, I haven't reported or investigated anything about that. It's just, what you hear coming out of the media and in Salvador. And you can make your arguments that was visible. So I think, granted, it's not a huge gap that a Salvador squad has where it's like, oh, we need a right back. But considering the marquee of Alex Roldan, how he's a consistent piece in the Seattle Sounders squad.
He played goalkeeper as well.
I watched that match, and it takes someone special to be in a position like that and keep a clean sheet. Granted, my Quakes lost, but I think the more the merrier, the more competition, the better. What I'm curious to see, and we've talked about this on the show and in our convos off camera, but I'm still curious to see how the whole, I wouldn't call it curse, but the tendency of what happens to Salvadoran players that come out of the MLS, make that jump, and how they're able to balance their club with the national team, considering that MLS's calendar is all kinds of weird, that it doesn't necessarily respect certain international windows, or it takes weird breaks, because you don't want to see these players make that leap like others have, and then because they're losing minutes, because they're not with their club, that they end up, not being that key piece in their lineup with their club, which you'd think that's the priority, because that's where they make their bread. So I hope that with all these players coming over, that it doesn't affect them. Or if it does, the national team does well enough that they can move on to other leagues that are at that level that can have the international players. Because I think that's the main fault that MLS has, that it's not designed for players that are at a top level or that play with their national teams. It seems like it's a really hard balance to pull off when you're an MLS player. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close this thing out, but really briefly wanted to go over the match dates coming up for the Octagonal. There's a lot, so there's a lot to read. And we'll probably be posting the calendar sometime soon on our Twitter and Instagram.
So we start the Octagonal in playing at home against the United States, September 2nd. Then 3 days later, we play Honduras again at home. So we have 2 games at home to start. Then we travel north to play Canada on September 8th. Then that's it for September. Then in October, we have another series of 3 games. We play Panama at home. Then we visit Costa Rica on September 10th. And Mexico visits us on October 13th. Then November, we play Jamaica in El Salvador. Then we go to Panama on November. There's no dates scheduled yet for November, specific dates. We just know that the games are going to happen in November. So November, again, we play Jamaica at home, and then we play Panama in Panama.
Yeah, I think it's within the first couple weeks of the month. Yeah. I think it's like the 16th and 11th, something like that, or 11th and the 16th.
But that hasn't been scheduled yet. Mm-hmm. Hasn't been confirmed. So then in January 2022, we visit the U.S., And then on the 30th, we visit Honduras. Then February 2nd, Canada visits us. Then we go to Jamaica on the 24th of March. And then Costa Rica visits us on the 27th of March. And then we close on the 30th of March against Mexico in Mexico.
Exciting, man. I'm like, should I go early in the qualifying round so that in case there's a bad result, we're still in it? Or do I want to go later with the hopes that we'll still be in it and vying for a spot? But then again, you always run the risk of possibly being eliminated by then. But going to El Azteca sounds like so much fun. So I don't know. There's some things I got to meditate on and start the negotiations to get my visa out of the house over here. Because, yeah, this thing only rolls around, like we mentioned, ever so often. And
the wife visa?
Yeah. And last time around, I didn't have a wife, but I also didn't have any money to go. So, things that happen.
Now you have a wife, and you still don't have any money to go.
Exactly. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us know.
Sponsors, if you're hearing us.
Exactly. We'll tone down the cussing if need be to get those wonderful sponsorships, but it is exciting, and fans will probably interact in our social media as well. But what are the matches you're most looking forward to? Which ones do you think would be perfect to fly out to? And even the away ones, like I bet the Salvadoreños in Canada are really stoked about the possibility of going to support La Selecta there. Will their hearts be torn between the Maple Leafs and La Selecta? Going to Mexico sounds amazing, but I don't want to necessarily get jumped. I don't know if that would happen. So I'll have to ask my friends from Mexico, like, whether it's convenient or not, because they've asked me, should I really want to go to Cusco for a match? And I told them, well, just don't wear the green jersey or show up by yourself. They're like, no, I'll just wear some random color. No, they'll still figure out that you're Mexican if you don't wear a blue jersey. That's your only safeguard. And even then, depending on the section that you sit at, there's always a risk of something happening. But again, exciting times.
Well, the games are exciting. I mean, it's hard to choose, but obviously, historically, if you just want to go watch a game without really knowing where we stand at that point in the qualifier, but the U.S., Mexico games are just Costa Rica games are just, but it's the octagonal. I mean, this is the beautiful thing about the octagonal. Pretty much every game is a good game. Every game, every point counts. It's hard to choose.
And even when El Salvador has historically been eliminated from contention and Mexico rolls in, it doesn't matter. We're still trying to be a killjoy and make things hard for them. So it'll be hard to pick and choose which ones to go to. I do want to give a shout out once again to my buddy Jordi out in Barcelona, who's probably feeding his baby bottle right now. But he mentioned, it's for the Euro, it's always so interesting to see when Italy plays and how they basically scream out the national anthem, how so into it everyone is. It almost reminds me, that's what he said, it almost reminds me of when we play Mexico at Cusco and everyone's so emotional and pumped up during the national anthem. And fortunately, I got to be there, not for next Hexagonal, but for the qualifying round with Ruben Israel when Purdy shut down in Chicharito. And there was some shady business with some of the goals that Mexico scored. Pacheco got to see his last goal with the national team. That was an amazing experience when we scored. But yeah, so much on the horizon, ladies and gentlemen. Let us know.
We didn't even talk about the Gold Cup schedule, so there's a whole
Gold
Cup prior
episode.
to that.
It's all good. We already talked about that in other episodes. Obviously, the closer it gets, we'll do a refresher here and there. We'll break down previous tournaments and how it's gone for us. And like we mentioned today, kind of what the team needs to focus on this Gold Cup, because those Gold Cups in the middle of a qualifier tend to be, I don't know how to put it, but kind of an unnecessary distraction. It's like drinking Coca-Cola after you've had like cake at a kid's party, you know, just too much of a good thing. So we'll see.
No.
Oh yeah. Okay, Cristiano. Oh yeah.
Agua.
Hashtag not a sponsor yet, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe they'll help us get to that point.
But in this case, Andres, the Gold Cup, it's a perfect timing for us, given that we have a new team, a new coaching staff, and we need to get games in.
Yeah, it's not a tournament that gets in the way where you're worried that you're going to get someone injured, where you're worried about exposing too much of your cards and whatnot. It's not getting in the way. It's like you said, the best thing that could happen leading up to such a great tournament. I'm excited. I'm not going to lie that it was a little bit anticlimactic with the last match, but as you mentioned, it was a 6-0 series, aggregate, 6-0 on aggregate. What more do you want? And now it's just time to turn the page, and hopefully they hit the ground running. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to close out. Want to thank you guys once again for listening to us. I'm really excited looking at the stats on the podcast because they're starting to go up, and that means that you guys are doing us the favor of and showing us that support of interacting with others, telling them about our show, sharing, subscribing, commenting. I've seen some of the comments on YouTube. We even have a confessed closeted Salvadoran fan from Mexico. So you can see some of those comments on our YouTube page. Also on the Twitter, been seeing those interactions, those comments, especially on match days. Shout out to El Pájaro for commenting. Also to Honey Nut Bootios, it's a funny ass name. Mauri Melar, Antonio Soto, everyone that's been commenting, we appreciate those interactions, and we'll see you guys next time because there's stuff on the horizon. Take care, everybody. Start saving up that money. Start looking at the mileage on your credit cards, because it's time to go back to the homeland for some matches, right?